Welcome back to solving linear equations, and this is the second part, 2 examples. Each of these examples contain fractions. The first thing we want to look at is the difference between the first example and the second example. So the first example contains just a single fraction and another single fraction. The second example is a little bit more complicated because we have two terms in the numerator. We have x minus 1 and x plus 1, whereas over here we just had in the numerator a single term 3, single term 1. So the idea to solve these is to eliminate the fractions. And the way that we can eliminate fractions is to multiply the whole equation by the least common denominator. And so looking at our denominator for this example, we have a denominator of 2 and 3, and the least common denominator is going to be 6. If I multiply this whole equation by 6, it will get rid of the fractions and make the equation easier to solve. So remember, you have to multiply everything by 6. We cannot multiply by different numbers. Whatever we do to one part of the equation, you have to do the exact same to the whole equation. So we multiply by 6, and when you multiply by 6, remember 6 is in the numerator when you're multiplying. And even though I do not have a fraction here, I still have to multiply by 6. And if you want, you could write 6 over 1 for all of these. So there's a couple ways to do this. You can calculate what the answer would be in your head, or you could write it out. So what I'm going to do is actually write out the steps, but if you can do this in your head, then go ahead. 6 times 3, that's going to be 18. So we get 18 over 2x, which turns into 9x. If you want to write 9x at this point, you can. Plus 6 is equal to 6x plus 6 times 1 is 6 over 3. At this point, second step, I can just simplify these fractions. Remember, the fractions need to go away, which they do. We get 9x plus 6 is equal to 6x plus 2. So from here, this looks exactly like one of the equations we were solving in the previous video. We have to make sure we put our like terms on one side. And so I'm going to have my x's on the left, and then the numbers will be on the right. So in order to do that, we subtract 6x from both sides. And at the same time, we can also subtract 6 from both sides. You can do this in 2 steps or 1 step. Remember, that's 0. That's going to be 0. We could cross it out if we want. And so we get 3x is equal to 2 minus 6. That's going to give us negative 4. And then we divide both sides by 3. We get x is equal to negative 4 over 3. When you solve equations, remember that you can have any type of answer, any real number, or we could also have no solution, or we could have all real numbers. In this case, we end up with a fraction, and that's okay. So let's take a look at the second example, which again is a little bit different because we don't have single fractions here. We actually have 2 terms in the numerator instead of just 1 term. And so we still want to find the common denominator between 4 and 2. And in this case, the common denominator is 4. So that's what I need to multiply by. We just have to be careful when we multiply how we actually do it. So what I'm going to do, since this is all one big fraction, I'm going to multiply here by 4. Remember, anytime you multiply by the common denominator for these equations, it's in the numerator. And whatever I do to one side of the equation, I have to do to the other side. So you can do this again, you can write out your steps or you can calculate it in your head. If you were to calculate in your head, you know that 4 goes into 4 and that would just be 1, and 2 goes into 4 and that would turn into a 2. So we could do that, or we can just again multiply, and when you multiply it's got to be 4 times 5, and then we would get 20. We do not change the part in the parentheses. And then in the next step, we would reduce 4 into 20 and make that into a 5. 4 times 3, 12. Do not change the part in the parentheses. So we have 5x minus 1 is equal to 6. X plus 1. At this point, the fractions are gone. You know that we need to use the distributive property as we saw in the previous video. So distributive property 2 times. And then at this point, I will have all the x's on the left. The numbers will go on the right. In order to do that, subtract 6x from both sides, and at the same time I can add 5 to both sides. This is 0, this is 0. Be careful with the signs. This is going to be negative 1x or just negative x, same thing, equal to, that's going to give me 11. And then remember, when you're solving equations, you have to get this variable to be positive. So at the very end, we need to have x equals. So to make this positive, you can do 2 things. We can multiply both sides by -1. You can also divide both sides by -1. I will divide by -1 on both sides. I know that a negative divided by a negative is positive, so it makes x positive, and this gives me an answer of -11, and that would be the final answer to this problem.